Welcome to Kaleidoscope Let's Talk. With the Galle Literary Festival just a week away, today on Let's Talk we have a powerhouse of creativity who will be at the Galle Literary Festival, Amanthi Harris. Her novella, Lantern Evening, won her the Gatehouse Press New Fictions Prize. Her short stories have been broadcast and featured in 2020's Best British Short Stories collection. And her most recent short story, Krinkum Crankum, was also broadcast in 2023. She also published Beautiful Place in 2019. She is not just a prolific writer. Amanthi, who makes her home in Colombo, England and Spain, has studied chemistry, law and fine arts. She's also a solicitor, a book editor and an artist. We met up with her virtually from her home in Spain for a tete-a-tete to find out what makes this award-winning author tick. Welcome, Amanthi. From chemistry to law to art, how do you grapple with all this diverse knowledge and bring it together in your writing pursuits?
I think really writing art and literature have always been at the forefront. So to some extent, I don't bring them all together. The studies were kind of a phase, I suppose, of my education. So I don't really refer to it, although I'm sure it influences me in the way that I approach my work and the way I organize my projects. But I think on the whole, I don't really see any kind of classification. I just go straight to what I'm working on, and usually it's something to do with art or writing.
Tell me about Lantern Evening and Beautiful Place.
A Beautiful Place is my novel set on the southern coast of Sri Lanka in a tiny imaginary village by the sea. And that I was working on for years. And I started it when I went to art college quite late, in my 30s. I went to art college and it was so inspiring and exciting. I started to think a lot about my childhood and the home I grew up in Colombo, and tried to merge all that with holidays to the south. And so I started to invent a lot of like a world, and this villa came out of it. And so Lantern Evening came kind of at a later stage, but it won the prize, and then as a result of that I had interest in the novel, so then the novel came out.
Krinkum Crankum, the title is intriguing. What's the buzz on this one?
So Krinkum Crankum is an ancient folk tale. I think it's from Finland. I first came across it on a storytelling workshop, my first ever storytelling workshop that I went on to learn to tell stories to children. And it was a very formative experience for me, because I realized how important storytelling was in terms of the way you connect your own story to these strange little abstract tales with kind of archetypal imagery. So I then started this long journey of exploring folk tales and fairy tales and myths. And so I was asked by some producers to write a story about storytelling for Radio 4, BBC Radio 4. And I could have drawn on the tale directly, but I actually wanted to write about what it was like to discover a connection to a story. So I used the story of Krinkum Crankum as the basis for my own story, which is also called Krinkum Crankum as a result. And it's still available to listen to. So it's available on the BBC website. And actually the phrase Krinkum Crankum is a very old word. It means kind of lots of twists and turns, and something very kind of ornate and maybe gnarled and twisted. So that's how it's used in the story.
From your published works, which of them do you find that you go back to creatively? Which of them actually is your favorite?
I've just finished the draft of my next novel, and I think I kind of returned quite firmly to Lantern Evening and the way I structured that, because I think that's probably the way I'm going to work for a little while, with using fragments of flashbacks and memories and different storylines kind of weaving into each other.
Which short story or stories of yours have been featured in the Best British Short Stories anthology?
It's a story called In the Mountains, and it's the first of a sort of loose trilogy of stories set here in Spain, in the mountains where I currently live. I've been writing stories about a character who lives in the mountains, and each one's been on Radio 4. And so Crinkum Crankum is the third story in this sequence. But the first story was called In the Mountains. It was about a woman coming on her own and being inspired by this place.
Now, you write art, you make art. Which methods of artistic expression do you favor? Is one better than the other when you look at it?
I kind of need both. That's one of the biggest realizations I had, that I needed to do both, and maybe at different levels. So if I'm like trying to put something forward for an exhibition, or then the art takes over and the writing kind of simmers away. But I think I work out ideas for one in the other. So I've just finished doing a little like a painting and drawing online class, and somewhere in the course of that I ended up doing a drawing that I thought might lead to a story that I'll explore in words. More or less, I have both on the go at some time.
What is your initiative Story Hug all about?
Story Hug was a community project that I ran when my daughter was young. I used to make art and tell stories and make up stories with families. It was meant to be a sort of way of bringing families together. Sort of grew little by little, and I eventually got funding from the Arts Council to sort of develop it for adults. And so I moved it into another phase, and then I work with different groups, like kind of an over 60s group that met in a community centre, and also another very beautiful project where people who'd had sort of mental health issues who went to. But I think it might be growing again into a more of a kind of writing project, because the people when I ran it for the adults, people would come back saying, oh, I did your homework, and I hadn't set any homework at all, but I used to give everybody like they could pull out a phrase from one of the stories from a bag, and just to think about on the bus home or whatever. But people got inspired to write their own short fiction from that, and I think all the playing and the art and the story making had kind of inspired them. So when they got home, they were writing beautiful short stories, which they brought to the next session. And so we ended up extending the session so that people could read their work, and we could share the writing that had come out of it.
Any words of advice for artists trying to embrace what you're doing?
Allow yourself to experiment and to play and to do things that don't make a lot of sense. Also read the authors that you are drawn to. There's so much out there, and so much so many reviews and so many suggestions, but to kind of go towards the authors whose somehow their work calls to you, and so therefore you read people that help your work in some way.
Thank you, Amanthi. More power to all you do with your pen and brush.